Hey, everybody, it's been a while, but we're back. And today we're going to talk to Aaron Williams, one of the founders in Tattcom. And if you don't know what Tattcom is, you need to get out there and take a look because it is the best power supply out there for your machine, hands down. So let's get into it. Hey, man, it's been a while, Aaron. How you doing, brother?
It has been a while, Mark. It's been great. Been really plugging away at a bunch of stuff in the background, but we're not silent. We're just have our heads down. Good to hear from you. And how have you been, man? It's cold up there this time of year, isn't it?
Been a strange ride this last year, brother. It's been business been strange, life's been strange, and that's just that's part of life in general, right? That's it gets boring if you don't have a little excitement once in a while. But yeah, I'm excited to see what you're doing. I kind of know what you're doing. We haven't talked like we normally do. We usually waste hours and hours chatting and texting, but we haven't done that in a very long time. So I'm going to go with my assumptions out, which is, we all know what happens when you assume, but I'm willing to put myself out there a little bit. Um, I know you work tirelessly and endlessly to try and improve your products and take the next iteration and all that good stuff. So I do know you've been working on, a battery pack type of thing, type of maybe machine type of thing. But I think it'd be best to hear it from well, you tell me what you're going to do, what you're thinking about, and what you're working on. Or don't. I don't know. We could just say things too.
Yeah. So I mean, we've had some with the power supply with the ESCX that's been out. Some firmware updates and improvements to it over the last year. Definitely some new features. Small changes. I think that, like, for example, you can go in and adjust the learn start voltage. When it does its calibration, it's going to determine an optimum jump start voltage for the machine. If you need to tweak that by a couple tenths of a volt and you want to raise or lower it, you can now do that in the menu if you prefer. So those are little things that give you the power and the flexibility with that product to really tune in and get things set up how you want it, because it's becoming more apparent as machines are using like 6-volt motors and jump starts with higher voltages, the damage that's being done to machines, and it's not ideal. So, you know, the it's just now coming to light, but that's been for the last couple of years something that we've been with the power supply addressing with how we jumpstart machines and try to do it safely.
Okay, so and that all depends on the configuration of the machine because I know myself and a lot of other builders are using the very same 6-volt motor, but depending upon the mechanical configuration all the way down to the drive system, how much resistance on it and everything. Even though we're using the same motor to start with, each one's requiring different levels of jump start to get going. And is that what you're saying? Or
Yeah, I mean, not all implementations you put a motor, the same motor into different kind of cars, depending on how much the car weighs and different factors, the transmission bolted up to it, it's going to perform differently. Somebody might put the same motor in for torque, maybe that would be an example of driving a large color packing cartridge, where the speed and agility, you would want something for lining. So really, it's not a one size fits all when it comes to the jump start. Um, and that's kind of how it's been, where you just turn jump start on or off, and it's just whatever's programmed in there. It's a pulse of voltage, most of the time 12 volts for around 100 milliseconds, a tenth of a second. That's not great on a motor that's not meant for 12 volts.
right.
So it gets the job done, but and that's hasn't been an issue really until cartridges have come around. So, that wasn't, it's been something that cartridges came around and to address the issue of starting the machine over that. Because if you're running needle on bar, then jump start's really not an issue with the machine. So, that's also something that's evolved
Right.
with.
So even if you program the right jump start for your machine, that might change based on what brand of cartridge you're going to use too, right? More
Exactly.
resistance requires a little more voltage.
Yep. Yep. It's not the grouping of the needle. It's the the membrane resistance. So it's just pretty much equivalent to a spring, as a spring constant that you can measure. So if it's got a higher spring constant, it develops more force per distance that it travels, and that's going to be more work for the machine to start over. Um, so
Now you say that your latest firmware updates allow the tattooer to make these adjustments. Now, how does that come back to be like, can they max this out to the point where they're going to fry their motor? Because I think part of your whole concept of doing this in the beginning was to keep people from toasting motors, right? So,
yeah, it tries to do things as safely as possible and keep the machine safe as its priority. So ultimately, there's a max voltage that's set for the machine bank that you're working with, and that's going to limit to what is safe for the motor to handle. So at no time can the power supply ever output more than that while that bank's active. And then
okay.
on top of that, during the calibration, it does a start test and tests to see what jump start voltage with the inserted cartridge is appropriate. And then it stores that. So it really is more of a tweaking factor if somebody wants to turn that down if they feel. We had a couple people saying, hey, maybe it's a tenth of a volt too high. We want to bump it back down. Yeah, go ahead. So
Okay.
some
But you
people don't
still
touch
have
it.
you still have like guardrails on there so people don't.
For sure. Yeah, there's a max limit that you can't turn that jumpstart voltage up past the voltage max for the machine. So,
Okay.
uh,
Cool, cool. So, I mean, I'm gonna pry. I want to dig. I want to dig because, like, I mean, in addition to like, we're filming here, we're having some fun, we're getting a little information out there for the people, but because we haven't talked in so long, I want to dig. I want to pry, and I'm gonna see what I can't get you to, just sort of puke out here in public about what you're working on. I know you're doing some cool stuff. Can you tell me? Can you not?
we've
Can you
definitely got some
elude?
we've got some cool projects going on. I can't allude too much right now, but it's within the next couple months that we should have some news on them and be able to show a little bit more. But it's really still in the prototyping phase. As you know, that takes a long time to go through several iterations and get things, polished up and ready for production. So especially being small companies, um,
Oh, I know. You know that I know, but all right, man. I don't want to put you too hard on the spot, but I kind
I
of
can
have
say right now we've got a really cool wireless solution coming out. It's going to be a co-brand, and it's gonna be several days that you'll be able to plug your machine in and run it off this essentially wireless power supply, um, and it's small for what it is. It's pretty cool, so I'm excited about it. I'm excited about the co-branding with it. So like I said, a couple months we'll be able to drop that and see where we're at.
very cool. All right, all right. I won't push you too hard on that then, I guess. But I really want to know when we get off the camera here, we're gonna I'm gonna dig even farther for my own personal knowledge. But
Hey,
I definitely miss talking to you. It's been quite a while.
for sure.
I know you've been out. I've been following you online, and I know you're bouncing around checking out a bunch of shows and doing things or whatever. So how has business been? I mean, I know it's hard trying to get people back onto a power supply when everybody wants the convenience of a battery, but
Yeah,
I mean, I know you still got sales, and I know you're still doing all right. So,
pe-
like,
people are still
what's
buying power supplies.
Mhm.
They're slowly either seeing the pains of wireless or they just never went wireless and they need a replacement for something that broke and want to see what's new and fancy out there, so they come to us. So you know power supplies are still selling. We've been working on new products for the future, but we're aligning ourselves because we try to do as much of the manufacturing in-house and keep as much of that um, made in America and made by us, not just contract manufacturers and whatnot. So we take a lot of pride in that, and that's how we keep our quality high. And but right now, to get to that next step, it's a lot of investment. As you have CNC machines and
yeah,
whole shop and other stuff like that to get in. So we've spent the last couple of years getting electronics manufacturing set up. Excuse me.
No, I
And
love seeing you get that stuff in there because it's like it's it's a different level of manufacturing than what I'm used to doing. So I'm like, I just nerd out completely when you start to, show me the fun stuff that you guys can do now. And I'm almost like, I want one of those. Yeah, I wouldn't know what the hell to do with it. I mean,
well,
it's like I'm not an electronics guy. I can do mechanics, I can do machining, I can do a bunch of other things. Electronics, I know enough to, you know, put a new light in my house and things like that. I don't know the finer details. So
yeah, it's been a learning experience. I've done hobby electronics and whatnot, but as far as doing something to this level, and then like you're saying, the manufacturing part of it, I've come from before I got into this was a CNC machinist. So I'm going back and getting CNC machines into what I know there, and actually still have a lot of my old tools and stuff like that. So get to dust those off and use them again. But at the end of the day, the electronic stuff, yeah, there's a lot to take into consideration. But it's rewarding. You get to start with a pile of components, and at the end of the day, you have put them all into a circuit board, and they all come out soldered, and then you put a program on it and stick it into a product, and you get to see that whole process through. So I'm
I mean,
excited to
it's
get to the
cool.
next level.
It's super cool that you can handle all levels of this from, design on through, the designing of not only the product, the mechanical, the engineering of the product, but the electronics and all that. And then not only that, but just follow it right on straight through with the full manufacturing process. What part of that do you think is your favorite? What is the part that gets you the most excited? Is-
I honestly, I kind of like just the whole process of coming from um, the idea and seeing the process through to this product in my hand that's working, and then just the software. I've realized a lot of what the products are today doesn't come down to the hardware. I mean, the hardware does play into to factor, because if you have poor hardware, you're just going to have a poor base to start with. No amount of software filtering or adjustments are really going to compensate for past a certain point of poor hardware. So hardware is important, and there are several products, in my opinion, out there that are lacking in the hardware department in that region that we've just tested. I mean, we like to benchmark and see what's out there and put ourselves, where what we manufacture and what we design is the luxury product that we intend to deliver. So that takes work and making sure that the subtle things sometimes, the spending a little bit of extra money on extra components and not building things to that price point, comes into play. Plus the extra time that it takes in the design and testing phase, because you'll design it to meet a certain criteria, and then if it doesn't, then that means you have to make adjustments and take another iteration and spend more money to get it to meet that requirement. So
Well, I'm going to ask you what you like the least about it. I'm fairly sure I know it's the marketing end because that's my least favorite thing in the world, to be honest with you. The 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 the, the never ending.
to
Uh,
be to be honest, the marketing, the sales, I like the in-person aspect of it, but yeah, the online marketing and doing that kind of stuff is kind of my least favorite.
yeah, no, and recently find myself doing a lot more of the marketing around here and trying to figure that out. And it's like, even though I'm smart enough to kind of figure it out and hire people that will help me with it, it's no fun. I've always been a guy who likes to build a product, good solid product, just put it out there, and I expect people to find it and buy it and do that. But it's like nowadays, it's like even, and it's not just us. Like we're manufacturers, we build things, we sell things. We have companies built around that, but tattooers nowadays, they've got to be marketing people. It's like everybody has to be some level of marketing or you get totally lost. And I just that's my least favorite part. So I know you feel it. We've bitched about that together before. I like like you said, the one-on-one, the small conversations, small group of people, or just, one-on-ones at a show, or, in the bar after the show. That
Yep.
stuff's awesome. It's just the whole idea of trying to appeal to the masses doesn't. That's why I'm so quiet these days. I guess, I don't want to do that, but we have to. So what are you finding? Like I know you've been back out doing shows. I still have not really gone out and done shows. What are you seeing out there? What do you like? Not just the market, but like what's changed? Let me live through you on this. You tell me what's changed.
I mean, obviously, the wireless technology has taken over. For a good portion of the artists out there, but like I said, there's a percentage of them that are taking into considerations the pain points of constantly charging 5 different battery packs and doing whatever is required for what the pain points they're feeling. They're various. It's not a one size fits all with why they might want to jump back onto a power supply. But
Well, I mean, the truth is the power supply, yeah, there's nobody out there doing the features that you have in your power supply effectively in a battery pack anyway. So it's like in my mind, I look at it as either you want the latest, greatest, coolest quality product, or you want the convenience of not having a cord. And that's like that. It kind of breaks it down to oversimplifies it, but it's kind of the
Mhm.
facts. It's like I know so many tattooers out there that just they refuse to cut corners on anything. They want the best of everything. They want the best machines. They want the best needles. They want the best inks. They want everything. Oh, but there's this really cool power supply over there. But hey, this is convenient. I'm just going to plug it on my machine, and I don't have a cord that I've worked with for the last 20 years. I I have a hard time understanding people that will take that shortcut. You know, it just
Well,
it's
I mean, I can't speak for every option out there because I haven't tested every option out there, but I've tested a couple of the options out there, and I can say that I can see why there's pain points, in the way they perform. Just I stick it on a very expensive, almost $2,000 DC load, and demand the currents out of it that you would see advertised in a power supply world. You know,
Mhm.
oh, I can provide 3 amps continuous. Well, nobody's, I guess, the compatibility of could you run a coil off these? And I guess some of the battery packs can, some of them can't keep up with that demand. But at the end of the day, nobody's requiring those 3 amp demands. Sometimes on like, excuse me, I need to take a drink. But yeah, some of the options out there we've tested are, in my opinion, maybe underbuilt. So
Well, I mean, people need to understand. I mean, batteries are, they're cool, they're convenient, but it's still it's in its infancy still as a technology.
it's
So,
it's
you have corded power supplies, which have been being done for just decades and decades and decades, right? And they're now at their kind of at their peak. You've mastered that. That's great. So you got this awesome technology, and then in order to take the new convenient one, you kind of got to go backwards. I, I
it's
don't
just,
understand.
I guess, things that inherently, some of the complaints that we've heard are the batteries are losing. They feel like they're losing what they were when they were new. Their
Mhm.
capacity over time. Whether that's the machine doesn't have as much, can't push the same grouping as much for as much time, or you know, um, they say sometimes it feels like it just has less power. And cells
Well, I mean,
degrade, and that's a factor of a wireless device. So you could design it that once the capacity, instead of getting the whole capacity out of your cell, you reduce it even more because you only want to get what it has, in the 60%. Anyway, it's it's never going to be that you have, uh, you're always going to be replacing cells.
right. I mean, it's
It,
like it's like your phones. They're they're awesome when you first buy them, and then the battery life just deteriorates over time.
Hmm.
It's the point where it's less use between charges, longer charges, and on and on and on. So, and it's the same thing. It's a lithium ion battery pack inside a different device. So,
Yep.
um, yeah, I don't know. It's
Now you can, yeah, I mean, they have the machines and power supplies or battery packs you can replace the cells on, that you can insert. Um, that is okay.
I
But
wanted to get down that road, and you kind of talked me out of it.
I mean, it just brings up concerns from a manufacturer standpoint, like liability wise, I would say, of somebody putting the shoe fits, they make several cylindrical cells in that format that could potentially fit, or things be put in there that at the end of the day, if you have an integrated battery or a battery pack that's not just a universal cell, um, it'll add some protections on your part, which some people might have an opinion about. But in the world that we live in, like, I worked for a while with a litigation firm and saw that end of how they would go after manufacturers for whatever the heck they could. So if there's any kind of damage on part of that battery pack, even if it's on the end of the user putting the wrong cell in it, then they'll say you should have put more warning labels on it and stuck something in there so they couldn't have done that.
Right. That's where that's where proprietary shapes and things like that come into place where, square peg, round hole, whatever. But the universal rechargeable cells out there. Like I said, I wanted to get down that road because that just seemed more convenient, like, hey, like a flashlight, you open up the back, you dump out the old battery, pop a new one in, and just continue along. But yeah, liability
Yeah,
is
well,
a
I mean,
bitch these days.
the problem becomes on not with that. If you're using like an off-board charging solution, then that kind of limits. But if you want to charge the battery on board of your device and things like that, then if it's got a different chemistry and you're pushing, more voltage into it, and at the end of its charge cycles and overcharging it, then that can end catastrophically. So it's a
Who's not down for a good lithium fire? I
But
mean,
I mean, the the opportunity on the business model too to sell batteries, and sell the things that keep selling. You buy a quality power supply, and as you know, like there's ones in the past in addition to the one we sell that will last you tens of 20, take care of it. Like there's common things with most electronics of like the electrolytic capacitors in it after 10 years or so might need to be recapped, but end of the day, that's
I still have a Dave Long power supply that I was running, man, maybe in the late 90s, early 2000s or whatever, I had two of them. I don't even know what happened to the second one, but I actually bought a backup figuring just in case, or whatever. I don't think I ever even, came close to firing up the backup because he made such a damn good power supply right out of the gate. So, yeah, it's something's made well, it's gonna last. But people don't want that nowadays. They gravitate towards the, oh geez, it's in a new color this month, I'm gonna buy another one, or it's in a slightly different shape, or it has one more button on it, and I'm like, man, I'm like, it's a totally different world than what I came up with in tattooing, where we would buy a set of machines and we always had a backup set of machines, but you ran your daily drivers till they failed, then you resprung them or did whatever. And it's like, we didn't, I don't want to say squander our money or whatever, but it was like, we were not about the latest and greatest. Something needed to be out and it needed to be substantiated. It needed to be proven. And then we would think about spending the money. Nowadays, people are just like, just crazy. I don't know. Is it the marketing? Is it I try and figure it out on a daily basis. Why do people do that? I
yeah. I mean, to a degree, yeah. You see, marketing does work. So some of it's that, some of it's just they don't know that there's better products out there or what is lacking that it's shiny on top, but on the bottom the build quality might suffer, or other things like that. How to evaluate, even like, as you were designing a machine and designing camshafts and even most of the pens and other machines, you have to counterbalance certain motions in the machine, and that affects the vibration of the end product. And that's a point that I don't see a lot of manufacturers advertise. I mean, they might, it's a low, but it's not like you can measure that with a tool.
Right. No, and again, we're both like, physics driven guys. So that's our functionality is way more important than form to us. It just always will be. And where everybody else is just like, hey, new color, and it's only $500 more than the last color, and people are like, yeah, and I'm like, I
like,
don't
we're
buy
going to
things that
measure
way.
vibrations and G's of acceleration. We're going to measure we can measure how much noise it's making in decibels with the under standard practices. We could adopt just standard testing practices as other products do, usually like a 1 meter distance. How many decibels is it? If it's quieter, you go into a different scale and adopt different terms, or different test procedures. But at the end of the day, those are points that, I guess, until you can really stack up the machines that are out there and get them on it even, how much does it weigh? How big is the diameter? How much vibration is it? Who's got, if it wasn't just a manufacturer advertised how long the battery lasts, if we had a standard at 6 volts, this is how much current does it draw, and then
Right.
we
Standard
standardize.
voltage, amperage, draw, and it's obvious that this one lasts longer than that one, and but they don't. Most people don't care about that. I don't know, and it's weird because like the reason I hate sales is, well, I was good at it before I get into tattooing, but and I didn't like living that lifestyle. Like selling people things they didn't necessarily need, or spending money they didn't necessarily need to spend. But with me, I have the hardest time trying to preach that my product is superior without tearing down the other products and the other builders and the other, that's where I kind of draw the line. I'm like, like, yeah, no, I make good stuff, go buy it or whatever. But I see
Yeah.
too much of like, the my stuff's better than their stuff. And I'm like, no, there's room for everything if you really, you know,
Well,
there's
to a point. I mean, when I get asked sometimes, like, why does this power supply feel better than what I was using, or the reasons to that. And when I ask, obviously we have our speed control, which if you're using a machine that can adopt that, but brushless machines have their own controllers built in that do their own speed control. So all we do is provide a super steady voltage to those, because if the input voltage is fluctuating, technically the speed is fluctuating that the controller is trying to follow. So that's my reasoning. And when we measure the competition versus ours, we can see that we're 10 times better in the measurement for what under load. You put it under a half amp load, 500 milliamps, 6 volts.
but
Here's
you
how
don't
much.
offer it in 16 different colors and a new one every month after that. I mean, come on, man, get with it.
Yeah,
Now, like, okay, you just mentioned brushless.
yep.
Are you seeing adaptation of brushless out there on any sort of level?
A lot of the wireless machines kind of offboard the speed control onto a brushless motor. And that works, but at the end of the day, like I said, if you're feeding it a poor quality voltage source, then you still have speed variations and speed fluctuations that, when we built the power supply, the first step before we could write software to control the voltage of a brush machine, we needed a super steady voltage source that we knew wasn't fluctuating for our software to be able to work with. So we had to
That's a
build a
prerequisite.
yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I mean, because we know the brushless motors are a lot more money, to develop.
And well, I mean, the reason that they cost more is because you have to have off-board electronics to drive them. So that is part of the cost, and that's where the speed control of a brushed motor. There are several ways to do it, but usually the drivers and things you're going to find are not in the form factor to embed into a tattoo machine.
Hmm.
You know,
Right. We talked about stuff like that, on the side before, and I'm like, I don't know, maybe I'm just old, maybe I'm just stingy, I don't know, but it's kind of like if you would have told me 20 years ago or 25 years ago or when I started tattooing 30 years ago or better that people would be spending $1,000+ on a tattoo machine and replacing them on a regular basis, I would have always said no way in hell. There's just no way. The people I knew back then, there's just no way in the world. It's just changed so much, and maybe I'm not adopting quick enough, but it's common practice now. I don't think there's a a wireless or battery pack machine out there right now, a good one for under $700, $800. That's kind of like the norm. And then you got your limited editions and your higher tier stuff that gets way up there. And it's like, I don't
and
know.
you have your rebranded import stuff that is sold that is marked up 3 times what it's available for normally. So
Um, that yeah, that's a whole different discussion, But we know that most of that import stuff just comes in with cheaper components and looser tolerances
which
and
honestly sometimes isn't a bad way to go because if it's depending on what is marked up and how they stand behind their products, they might just when it wears out give you another machine after whatever to keep you as a customer. But I've heard mixed opinions on the support that you get from overseas machines. I mean, it's hit or miss.
that comes down to whether the person that they're buying from is actually a manufacturer or whether they're just some side hustle dude who just buys wherever he gets stuff and
Yeah,
resells it and has no control over the quality or whatever. But and uh, trust me, I've been working with China for decades now, and you're never, well, most people never know what they're actually dealing with over there, and you can you can look online and find 3 things that look identical or 4 things that look identical, and the quality, but just amongst those 4 can be so dramatic. It
yeah.
just the variances, and they're like, no, it's the same blue one that I got. I got the same blue one from Walmart. This next guy got from Amazon, and mine lasted forever, and his fell apart. And like,
I mean, you
well,
can even get where you order like a batch and then a couple months later you get the same product from the same manufacturer and just email the same, hey, send me 100 more of these. And then the quality is just completely gone or, the parts are completely different. The polarity, we've had connectors come with polarities reversed on them and other stuff. And it's like, at that point, we've investigated those cost saving measures and for the amount of cost saving that it is versus the headache. And then
there is no.
sometimes you get slapped with a nice tariff bill after you get something. So a lot of the time you just buy it from a U.S.
Well,
supplier. That's
I don't
easier.
even want to think about tariffs. They've cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars. And just, I that is such a sore spot with me. It's just unreal. But yeah, yeah, I'm not even gonna talk about that. Let's just say that. Um, but no, it's like you said, there is no cost savings a lot of times with dealing with that. But then at the same time, if you are dealing with a reputable manufacturer overseas, that can be a great experience. I mean, I've been dealing with the same company for decades, and we have good communication and good quality control and respect for each other, and that all works out. Consistency is not an issue. But that being said, in developing that relationship, I went through multiple other factories and I wasted tens of thousands of dollars trying to get what I did eventually find. But yeah, it's hit or miss. But I'm so stoked for you actually doing as much as you possibly can in house here in the States. I mean, that is awesome. I love to see that. And I think
That's
you
been
got to preach a little bit more of that.
part of our dream from the beginning. Wasn't just to build a product and sell or to have a product and sell it, was to build it and all aspects, as you said. To have that control and the we don't hire developers to write our software. We write all that in house, and that's where occasionally if it fits in and depending, somebody might message me, hey, I'm having this issue, check it out. Oh, that's a bug. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
launch a firmware update, hit them up 15 minutes later. Hey, install this. Yep, it's fixed. All right, cool. I go back to what I was doing. You know what I mean? That affords us the flexibility of having those resources in house and the
Well,
knowledge.
it's also the scale. I mean, there is something to be said about being a small business. I mean, I remember back in the day when I used to be the guy that answered all the phone calls and I filled all the orders and I did, everything from A to Z. And I knew my customers, I knew their wants, I knew their needs, I knew their shipping preferences. I mean, I knew their spouses' names, I knew their kids' names. It was very, very, very personal. Maintaining that as things grow becomes more difficult, almost impossible once you develop a certain client base. So I hope you can maintain that as long as humanly possible. I mean, that's admirable. It's awesome.
Yeah, I feel like even if when we grow, the root core values there will still be there. Even when I've hired actually surprisingly tattoo artists here locally during the slow season because we're kind of tourist shops locally here. So I've brought a couple of them down and helped assemble units, and a lot of the times I instill into them like if you just spent this money on a power supply, how would you want it to arrive? Like put that care into there. One obviously if somebody isn't happy and they're helping produce your product, that's like a weak link in a chain. It's they're gonna
yeah,
not care about what they're doing. I could have the best automated QC machine, and that freaking red flag that blows up could be the whole screen on a 30-inch monitor, and they'll still let that thing pass on the conveyor. You know what I mean? So like,
I pushed the go button. That's what you told me to do.
people are people, and I hate like saying automation and a lot of the stuff we do, we can't adopt automation, but that still requires individuals that care about what they're doing to step up and help build products and run, because at the end of the day, like if we can stay like at this scale, or we can start adopting and releasing some of that control, which is nerve wracking, but that's a lot of things that you got to do if you want to step from being the small business to being something bigger.
Yeah. But I mean, just keeping your hand in it is just always important. Yeah, recent events in the world and everything that's going on here. I find myself, working, alongside our customers more frequently lately here, picking up the phone. I was just on the phone with a customer or whatever. Guys are on lunch and all that. And I just sort of like pick up the phone, taking an order or whatever, or hopping it on busy days and filling orders and doing things like that. And it's awesome because one, I enjoy it, but two, it's kind of like getting into the flow of a system that I haven't been in a while. I can see what's wrong with it too. It's like I'd be like, why are we doing it this way?
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, that's just the way we do it. Like, wouldn't this be better? Like, just like it's almost like a new set of eyes on an existing policy and procedure that was put in place at a time when it was the best option, but it's no longer the best option. So like, yeah, I
It's
love
like
that.
the eternal struggle of any creative, right? It's like you got to like get it enough to be viable. You can't, nothing's ever going to be perfect, so you can't ever spend that amount of time on it. But you don't want to release, in your opinion, of what you consider of your work, poor work or substandard work. So you're always pushing yourself to that standard and to excel above it.
There,
It's tough sometimes.
and like honestly, like you're getting into hiring and getting the substandard workers occasionally, and you got to weed through a lot before you get good ones. Um, One of the biggest problems we've ever had with hiring is people that get set. They're taught a way to do something, and that's just the way they'll do it forever. They'll do it that way forever. But even when we create new policies, new procedures, new whatever, they can't shift gears. They
Mm-hmm.
can't accept change and move on or whatever. And
Yeah.
as you and I know, things change way too fast. Like you said, just new problems get thrown at you on a daily basis. From the electronics side, maybe not a daily basis, but what I'm saying is like, there's a new curveball. Hey, how do we swerve to approach this or whatever? Um, so finding employees that will do that, like be willing to change their mindset and expand and grow and learn and everything with the company, because this company is way different than it was a month ago, 6 months ago, a year ago. And
Mm-hmm.
you're probably moving even at a faster pace because of the smaller scale. So, and well, we've known each other what, 5 years now, 6 years,
It's getting there.
something like that.
Yep.
And your world has changed dramatically since batteries didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Pens didn't exist. None of this stuff really existed on any level.
The pens were just starting to get hopped up.
Maybe, yeah, there were just, but it was really, I want to say it was Cheyenne was the only one that was probably pushing a pen then or whatever. No, there was a couple. Okay, so there was a couple direct drives in pen form.
Mm-hmm.
What's his name? From Stylus, a couple of others, but it wasn't on any scale. And nobody was thinking battery, nobody was thinking cordless. And so you started developing a corded power supply. So, like, think about that, how dramatic your world has changed in just a few short years, where you've got to retool, regear, everything. Uh, Look at it, So hiring, sorry, rambling on here, but like hiring employees to do a job, like, so let's say you hired people to make corded power supplies, and you get people that don't want to make batteries or cordless or Bluetooth or whatever down the road. It sucks because sometimes you get to part ways with people that love and adore, but if they can't change their ways and move and grow with the company, then what are you going to do? So,
Yeah, it's like with almost any position, just finding somebody that just has a brain that was you willing to use it. I mean, everybody has a brain, but somebody that's willing to use it and realize that the appearance to an employer of just being there to I mean, everybody's there to get paid, obviously, but it's an exchange, right? So as an employer, you're expecting something in that exchange of payment of services, and sometimes that's not just sitting around and saying, well, I was waiting for you to give me something to do, or I don't care what you were doing, really, just anything other than sitting there. And
mm-hmm.
that's not something I've dealt with because we have a relatively small facilities, and I'm right here with most people, not hovering but doing my work. So I mean, at the end of the day, if I pass by and you're on your phone, it might get milked. But for
I don't know.
example, like
There's always something that needs to be done. It's just a matter of finding people that are willing to get up and do it. So,
one young man, I was training for like 3 days on soldering, on like hand soldering, and he had soldered up just like I gave him a whole pack of leaded resistors. We don't even work with like through hole leaded components, but it's kind of the same principles once you learn to solder it. So here's a whole bunch of these, and solder them in some perf board, and I'll pay you for the day to do that. Right. So I just spent like a day doing that. Then the next day, um, I think we spent, I forget what we did at the beginning of the day, but ended up, hey, let's make a circuit that actually works, because it's like I'm going to try to excite you about this a little bit and not give you something that's just soldering a bunch of resistors that do nothing. So we just did like a little LED circuit, that you put 5 volts into, and calculated the current resistor and put an LED on there. And he lost one of the components that I gave him. And long story short, so he comes up, and he finished it, right? So he lost the current resistor, and he still finished the job. Great. I'm plugging the thing in, wondering why the hell LED isn't coming on, where I've gone wrong. I'm like, did I make a wrong calculation? I still had the resistor pack out. So I looked at it, I was like, nope, that's the right one. And I get the meter out, and, or look at the resistor, look at the bands. I'm like, nope, that's definitely the wrong value. You can put like a 0 ohm jumper resistor on there.
it was an
He's like,
IKEA
oh,
board. It was an IKEA board. Some parts aren't necessary.
I said, where'd you get that from? He goes, oh, it was right here. It fits. So I put it in. I was like, Jesus, dude. That's like my worst nightmare of hiring somebody that's just like, oh, I grabbed this, it fit, and I put it in your product and then shipped it to a customer just because, you know what I mean? Like, nah. I mean, you should have processes in your workflows that prevent that kind of stuff. And
Well, I know you have
but
pretty cool testing devices you made.
as you
So
know,
nothing's going out the door if it's failed, but it
as you
just
know, those instances when you try to put those protections in, people will find ways around them.
true story.
They will find your weaknesses and exploit them.
Yes.
So
Yeah. No, we had like we've spent a ton of time and energy and money on organizing the warehouse for order picking and packing or whatever, right? Because we want to eliminate any order errors. That's
yep.
So what do? We go through, we spend a boatload of money, we barcode everything in the warehouse. We buy those little the hand scanners, like
Handheld.
inventory management hand scanners, blah blah blah. So we're picking orders that way now. So every single item gets scanned. You can't scan the wrong item, and you scan it, you put it in the cart. Pick up the next one, scan it, put it in the cart.
Yep.
And simple policy procedure. That's what we do. And then you walk down and you see an employee picking up, you know, quantity 5 on the order. They pick up one and they scan the same box 5 times, put it on the cart, meaning to go back and get the other 4, but they don't. Our policy is you scan each individual box. It's annoying, it's whatever,
Yeah.
but it's there for a reason. It's to eliminate the human factor, right?
Well, like you said, when I say exploiting the system, it might not be intentionally, because in that case, like you're saying, they meant to go back and get the other 4, and it just, hey, lunch bell rang or the phone rang or another order came in or something else like that. I'll grab this one and get it on my way back, and that's how.
But if you follow the policies and procedures that are put in place, you kind of can't screw up. I mean, there's always going to be the random error, but I mean, it's just I don't want to say people get lazy or they try and cheat the system or exploit it, but it's like to them in their mind, it's like, what's the difference if I scan this box 5 times or if I scan each box individually? In their mind, they can't rationalize the difference. Now, but this is all kind of irrelevant. But no, like I know, you have a ton of testing procedures and boards. You test all your boards. You have these whole devices. You set them on, run power through them, and everything. I'm always impressed.
Yeah.
With those.
We try to do a lot of the testing and other things that we can without too much investment. Just automate it. Just if we can write a program and build a fixture, like you said, to run through and check to make sure everything, if it passes that, that's the benchmark, So then we can measure the benchmark and know what its standards are. So it has standards of its resistances and other things that it has on it. And check it. Yep, it's still good. It's our internal calibration, but it's definitely it also has pointed out a lot of problems. Not everything is perfect, especially getting our line up and going, but that's what rework is for, and almost any manufacturer is going to have rework. So the important thing is just catching that before it goes out and fixing that solder joint on the rework bench, and then you put it back through and it passed. Okay, good. That's good now. So it's not that it's a reject part, it's just intermittently in the process, and he's got to go and circulate back through. So
yeah, I mean, I've really enjoyed watching you guys grow and do things. It's just, I don't know, because it reminds me of the younger days when it was pretty much just me starting, and just, like I said, things change rapidly and directions change and everything. It's just, you have to be flexible at that stage for sure. Hell, I have to be flexible, this day and age here. But yeah, no, I don't know. I get excited just talking to you all the time. It seems silly. It's like a man crush thing or something. I don't know. Not that way though. Not weird. Just. So what shows are you doing next? Where are you headed off to? What's your plan?
We've got a couple that we're sponsoring. I'm going to try to be at this year. Things are kind of, with the new projects, will probably require me here sometimes, so I haven't really committed. I know what I want to go to and what I'm going to try within the time frames that I have to go to, but I can't commit until we're close.
You're going to vaguely elude my question again. Okay.
Well, Homeward Bound, that's coming up in March here. Their first show of the year, so that's out in Tulsa.
Do you think you'll have this new product by then?
I'm sending out what is hopefully the final prototype next week.
So 3 more.
Just we've already been to 3 more. No, so yeah, and they hopefully everything bolts up and we're ready, and we've got a commitment to roll on for a production order after that. So we're just ironing out these kinks, and I think that we'll be out by the end of the first quarter with it.
Okay. Well, that is March. So that's that'll be cool. Yeah, but this sucks, man, because I was really, really planning on trying to dig into your brain and get you to spill the beans on some stuff here, but you're like,
I mean, we've got some designs for wireless machines and other products like that we I've got multiple ideas. It's just picking one, and the other problem, as I said, is getting tooled up. So
those projects have to be secondary to what pays the bills. So, we all know how that works. So, but yeah, I was hoping I don't know. I know.
I probably could talk about it. I just, without confirming that, I don't want to.
So. I know. I'm just saying, like, I mean, I know as soon as this is done, you and I are gonna jump super on the phone, and we're gonna text some gritty details about some cool shit, and it's just not ready for the public airwaves yet. I get it.
Yeah, so. Yeah.
Just very good that are worth addressing your spelling.
Okay. All right, Gabe's over here putting.
I got two things to run.
Bugs in my ears, like just finding some stuff that's gonna make better fill for the content than you and I just rambling. But basically, dispelling myths about power supplies, which whatever kind of like what do people believe versus what is true versus the problems that your product's going to solve, stuff like that. So, I mean, that's obviously you know all these. You've been it's your selling points for your goddamn products to start with. So, what myths are there? What are you seeing out there, kind of as myths in the power supply, tattoo power supply world out there that may not hold true, and what are going to be, what? God, I can't fucking speak. You know what I'm trying to say. I know
what you're trying to say. I'm sorry. I'm over here.
I just can't put it in proper words where it's going to sound decent.
So, Aaron, what is one that you might answer so that Mark leads in with a question?
So one would be that a higher amperage power supply is going to make your tattoo machine run better.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. All right. So let me phrase this in my head here for a second. Okay. All right. A little bit ago, I heard you talking, and you were saying something about machines are required 3 amps of power and a higher power supply. Start that crap over again. All right. So a little bit ago, you mentioned something about people wanting 3 amps to run a machine and stuff. That just seems ridiculous to me. I mean, even when I was running really big, heavy coil machines back in the day, I don't think I ever required 3 amps. So there's people out there that really believe a high amp power supply is going to be their answer. And what can you tell me about that, Aaron?
So you do need current, obviously, to run a power supply. You're not going to run it with no current, but how much current really depends on the machine that's on the other end of the cable. There's a difference between how much current something's going to take upon startup versus what it ends up being when it's running. That's both coils and rotaries. You're going to have inrush current into the coils and things like that. So at the end of the day, 3 amps is a little excessive on the, most things aren't really going over an amp. At the end of the day, it all works down to you're getting power from the wall, right? You're putting it, in our case, and most of the cases with a power supply, you're putting it through what you would call wall wart, or like some kind of a DC power supply that sits on the floor, like a laptop supply. That kind of isolates you from the wall power because of the transformer. So that way you're not directly attached. If there's a lightning strike or something else, it's not going to directly come through that transformer. So that goes into your device, our device, in our case, 12 volts DC. Some other guys use 19 volts. And then it goes out into your machine. Your machine is doing work. The motor's doing work. But everything along the line has an efficiency. So what the efficiency coming through that wall converter is, then going through, in our case, our power supply, which we're, I think when we measured last, 94% and change. And then it goes off into the machine, and then the machine does work. But everywhere along the lines, when you have that loss that you're not at 100%, you're dissipating some heat, the power being consumed. So the wall wart would be dissipating a little bit of heat. If it's, most of the time they're super high efficiency, or high efficiency. If the machine's not high efficiency, then you start dumping a lot of heat out of it.
Yeah, it's got to overcome more. Like, well, a lot of people just don't understand the difference between voltage and amperage. They kind of bundle them all together as to whatever. So, maybe you can explain that a little bit to tattooers to understand. Because, like, you were just talking about 19 volts, and people think about 12 volts for tattoo machines, and we run 6-volt motors, and like that gets confusing. Maybe you can square that.
Yeah, ultimately, the voltage and the current multiplied together are going to give you the power consumption in watts. And ultimately, the power is what you can compare from one to the other. So, if you have a higher, it's a balance. For example, if you look at like a lot of appliances that run on dual voltages, with the same math, like at 220 volts, they consume half the current that they do at 110 volts. That's just Ohm's law. So that's the same with all this.
So a 6-volt machine running 2 amps is no different than a 12-volt machine running 1 amp. That's the same amount of power.
Yeah, and ultimately, how much, this is something that there isn't really a number for, but you can kind of tell by what's being used out there and what's kind of doing the work already, that 5 watts, in the 5-watt range to 10-watt range is, sufficient. Even 3 watts, if you're running liners to small shaders, if you're not trying to pack with huge mags, is sufficient. But if you start pushing tens of 20, 30 watts into a handpiece, you essentially have a soldering iron. I mean, it's concentrated over a little bit larger area, but you're dumping a lot more power. That could be 2 volts at a lot of amps, or it could be a higher voltage at a lower amperage. I mean, you multiply those two numbers together and you're going to end up, if you're at 20 watts, you're going to have heating problems. But nobody luckily is that crazy. But the efficiency of machines, especially with like wireless, it's something, again, that you have a driveline efficiency of, it comes out of the motor. The motor, I can look up if it's a reputable manufacturer and say, this is 81% efficient. So 19% of the energy coming into it, we're going to dissipate as heat in the motor somewhere, whether it's bearing friction and, other losses. And then we're going to get the usable out the other end. Well, if we have our drive lines are only 50% efficient, then we cut that output again in half. So that's where good engineering and paying attention to that kind of stuff.
And the whole point to this whole discussion is, if you don't start with good, clean, pure power to start with, each of those losses they compound as they add up down the line, right?
Well, like I said, like your machine shouldn't be requiring, if you're putting, 3 amps at 6 volts, it's 18 watts of power. So that's just, again, when I'm talking in the range, And when I'm talking the range of if you're over 5 watts, you're going to have heating problems in your tattoo machine, and it's going to get hot. That's just that you're dissipating that much power there. If you're into computers, you'd know like the total power dissipation of the chip versus how much heat sink capacity you need to dissipate that much power. That's essentially the problem we have here is your motor is your CPU generating heat, and then we need to dissipate it. And depending how thermally coupled it is through the housing and other things to if it's insulated by air, that could slow how fast it could cool, and we'll end up having a 120 plus degree. If it's all depends on the design, but those are the things where my machine's getting hot. It's like, that's how it is. Design not great.
Inefficiencies.
I mean, it works, and there's probably within the spec of the motor in some cases it's fine, but like when you think of it from a comfort standpoint of designing the product, you would want to like assign a limit and say my product shouldn't ever get hotter than this in any kind of circumstance, right? It's not that it's going to burn somebody or something else. It's just uncomfortable. Who wants to hold on to something that's 130 degrees?
Well, and if your power supply has the ability to push 3 amps, 5 amps, whatever, it's got a higher probability of generating that heat. I mean, there's like you obviously need enough amps to run your machine, but there's no, other than that, there's no real advantage to having a power supply with massive amperage. The lab power supplies we use, 30 volts, 30 amps. I mean, we could cook the machines.
If you take the water analogy, right? We have a pump or a water supply. We're taking our garden hose, and it's got this capacity with its pressure and how much volume, the pressure being the voltage and the volume being the current, roughly an analogy. And then we introduce a very small restriction, and we put a cap on it, and we just drill this tiny, tiny little hole. And that's really, in reality, our machine is that tiny hole. It can only use that amount at any given time. So having the rest, yeah, it's good, but it's, until we either, or if we put a valve on there and we just barely open the valve, but then we could crank the valve all the way open. But in most of the time, and most of the machines we're operating, and most of the things that we need, we never need that much. Just like we're not tapped into the city water main. We just have our residential pressure that's several tiers down from that, so it can, so we don't need those crazy continuous 5 amp, all these I've seen marketed, that's something that's going to make your machine run good. And
you don't need a tractor trailer to go get 2x4s at the Home Depot, pretty much.
Well, again, I'm not saying that I'm not saying
you can get more 2x4s,
but I'm not saying a power supply wouldn't need that, or that having that capability, because again, like your inrush currents and starting the machines and certain other peak instances like that, but your continuous capacity, but really the core is the higher current won't make your machine run better alone, right? Because your machine ultimately, the motor is going to be at a speed, if it's a brushed motor, that's proportional to the voltage going into it. And the same
just comes down to like, okay, you can have a 50 amp power supply, but your machine is never really going to efficiently use more than 1.5 to 2 amps of that. You can have all the others that you want, but it's not and the point is, it's not a selling point of the machine or the power supply, really.
Well, I've seen some saying that makes the machine run better, having that higher current, which at the end of the day, the current alone, the testing is the thing under load, and testing for some of the things we look at when we test, right, is we'll put a load that's not a machine, because obviously we just hook a machine up and look, and but we can't standardize that. So like I said, we have some expensive DC test loads that are very precise, and we can load up the output repeatably and test it, at automated on a, slowly increasing that current up to a limit. We measure the output voltage and see how much it drops. So that's one thing. Like, can we draw 0.5 amp from at 6 volts, which is 3 watts, without you having 0.5 volt to drop on your output? That's a relatively light load. You should be able to supply that without dropping that much voltage. You
Right.
know,
So cleaner, more steady power is more important than an overabundance of power.
correct.
Okay. That was all we needed to say, probably.
And then
But
you really only need as much after that to get the biggest machine you have. But really, if you have a machine that requires 3 to 5 amps to get started, it's probably because the guy building it didn't have a lot of idea of what he was doing at the end of the day. Because, you know, the motor used and the other mechanisms and things that are making it need that much current are probably not.
well, I mean, every object in that is stationary requires more energy to get into motion than it does to stay in motion. You know, so the same thing with electric motors or coils. You know,
Yeah, I mean,
overcoming the spring tension on a coil
minus
machine.
external
like,
forces. But,
yeah.
you know, if you have like a lot of friction in your mechanisms and, you know, other problems like that, then you'll definitely, if you have a motor that's capable of 15 watts, you know, then you're usually only pulling a fifth of what it can do, you know, 3 watts or so when you're going. But then, like, if you have mechanisms that are drawing another 3 to 4 watts, you might not be in a heating situation where you're still like, yeah, it gets a little warm. It's 90, 100 degrees, you know, but at the end of the day, it's just grinding past the poor build quality of these components aren't finely meshed together like a Swiss watch. You know, they're just kind of like hammered together. So
I remember tattooing with some coils back in the day that would physically burn the back of your hand. It would get so uncomfortably hot, you know, and it was just because, you know, it wasn't running right, the spring tension or a multitude dirty points, whatever it was on the machine. And as a tattooer in the middle of a tattoo, you just reached over and you just burned up the power. Just and then it'd be fine for a little while, and you had to overcome the residual magnetism in the coils and all these other things, and it start to slow down and not work so well. And you just go over and turn up the power, and then by the end of the day, you know, you had a medium well finger at the
what's
top.
up?
It's just
Roasty.
good stuff, man. So glad we don't have to do that anymore. Or I should say, I'm glad I learned how to solve those problems eventually. But
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I've been tinkering with the idea just because it's what boils down to, sometimes it's boiling down to just trial and error and knowing kind of what works on tuning. But like in theory, the tuning could be a 98% mathematical exercise, you know, and modeling your mechanisms and knowing your, you know, your rear springs and what exactly the properties of material are. And, you know, that's something that has interested me, is to go through and design possibly something that.
it's not black magic. And
What's
only a
that?
few people. It's not black magic, and only a few people can have the ability to do that.
No, and there's guys still using coils out there, you know. Sometimes it's just lining. Some guys are still doing their whole process with coils. You know, loyal to the coil to the grave. But
We ship orders on a regular basis that go out with needles on bars and cartridges in the same order to, you know, to the same individual. There's a lot of people that still insist on lining with bar needles.
I've got the lining with the bar needle. I've got my hypothesis that's the cartridges, and I've seen some things. I guess it comes down to the support that you get. You know,
Is your theory based around velocity?
around velocity? No, I just think it comes down to you know, when you rubber band your needle bar on the machine and support it, and then you have it in the tube, like it's just going to be less wobbly than you have like when you have your cartridge and just a short piece that can fluctuate.
I think it's mass. It's velocity and mass is what it comes down to in my mind. Again, going down the physics world book here, but like that, just that long bar, the whole thing's, I don't know. It's just in the armature bar behind it. It's a large mass moving, and the velocity of the straight forward and back motion as opposed to um, the rotary circular, you know, interpolation of it's changing speed. You know, it's changing up and down speed when it's capped. So, but
I mean, like if you don't have
My words are hard today.
if you don't have like what you're saying, like if you have mass behind the components, then you have inertia, right? And that is energy that you've put into the system at some point that's retained by the system, where if you don't have that, like if your device is capable of providing those instantaneous power spikes and just powering through that without needing that inertia, um, you know, in certain instances, like you see like flywheels on like an internal combustion engine, that's mainly to get it between its firing pulses, or like an electric motor, like if you look on like Teslas and other stuff like that, like electric vehicles, they don't have some big flywheel they spin up and use. They just deliver the torque instantaneously and can provide that current to the motor to do that without having some big mass attached,
I don't know.
because that slows down that slows down. Not that it's a, I mean, if you think about it from the design point, like holding a steady speed, but also getting started and other things is you're not as responsive with the motor. So from like a control standpoint, like if you put like a big mass on the end of a motor, then you slow down its response to any input. So when you're trying to hold a steady speed, whether it's with a brushless controller or a brush controller, like that just makes it potentially work a little bit harder.
I don't know. Bringing down the theory rabbit hole here quite a bit, but I don't know. I still love coil machines. I just don't use them anymore. With me, it's the vibration in the wrist. It causes me a great deal of pain. So,
but that's the thing. That's because a lot of those are inherently imbalanced. So if you bought a coil machine, if I built one that was balanced, because that's one of the criteria I find is important, obviously from a comfort, and the weight is not a boat. It's comparable to what you're, I mean, and the where that falls above your hand. And I mean, there's guys out there building different variations of not your standard stack up coil.
oh yeah,
With
it's just that. Okay, then there's the group that's just no. We need to be using the things our forefathers were using 100 years ago, because that's the way it should be. And I'm like, all right, cool. I'm into nostalgia and history, and I love that stuff passionately. But at the same time, like you're saying,
that's
maybe we
cool.
build a better coil. I don't know.
I mean, it's like if you're into chopping wood, you can have your axe. I'm gonna have my steel chainsaw and have fun with it.
I have my chainsaw and the splitter, and
I mean, you can go chop down the tree with an axe if you hate life. I mean, there's exercise just to know that you can, but why would you want to go do, unless if you only need to chop down one tree, I mean, or a limited amount. But if you
pull out your pocket knife and whittle the tree down if you really wanted to, but that's just a matter of efficiency. I don't know. My worst part of firing wood is stacking. I hate stacking.
Like you said, a perfect example of like poor design that has just been, it's just the way it's always been, is like you're saying, you're running your coil and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I need maintenance at the worst possible time, and it's not something that you could just do the maintenance on and then it's good for another 3 months. Like you could, but chances are you're going to need to clean your contacts again at some point. You got a little piece of sandpaper sitting in your drawer you're going to take out, and hang on a second, take your gloves off and fuck with it for a minute, and then go back to tattooing, and I need to fuck with the rear spring, I need to do this, and it's never like the changing your oil in your car is something that you can schedule that maintenance. You know what I mean? Where if it's designed properly, then like we know these bearings are rated for this many hours, and after you approach that, then we're gonna have to start to address servicing them, and or alternatively, if you're not keeping track of hours, then just having like we dealt with that same motor, that Fallhaber motor you were dealing with
I remember in the 90s when Mickey Sharps was just really starting to get popular here in the States. I remember guys that would order a half a dozen or a dozen Mickey Sharps machines at once, and they would sit down and they would tattoo with them, and they would tattoo, and as soon as months and months and months later, and the thing just started to get finicky, and they would just stop tattooing, go up over to the cabinet, open up the cabinet, pull out a new one, set it up, and go right back to work, and that other one just went in the junk drawer and yeah, picked up some really cool machines back then that way. But it was just, I guess that's kind of how people think about rotaries nowadays too. You know, it
Disposable.
works until it doesn't, and then it's trash. With the coils, it was different. You could rebuild them if you knew what you were doing. But people even then were considering tattoo machines kind of as a consumable, kind of disposable. So some thought processes haven't changed.
Well, I am considering tattoo machines as, I mean, I guess you can make it disposable, but ultimately it's a precision instrument. And whether you view it that way or not, like if you do, you're probably going to have better chances of excelling because you understand the requirements of what you need to do to get the work of, what's being put out these days. If not, then you're going to, struggle with working around your equipment, which I've been a victim of and throughout my life, whether it was when I was a CNC machinist working on clapped out machines and, hey man, this shouldn't be this hard. I've got to make sure to approach every cut from the same direction to compensate for backlash and take all these extra efforts to work around this clapped out. Yeah, I can do it and I know it, but like, do I really want to? I'd rather just load the thing on and like looking for machines now. That's things where I'm prioritizing certain things on, I could do it that way, but why the fuck
Well,
do I want to?
I mean, that's the way my generation of tattooers worked. We worked with the tools we had available to us, and not a lot of them that were outstanding. So we would adjust our methods, our techniques, our hand speed, our power input, or whatever we needed to do. You just found the workaround to get it done. Where now it's very different. Now it's like if you look around, you can find a machine that's kind of going to fit your hand speed, your technique, your style. Awful lot of shopping's involved with that and a good bit of money spent. But, the options are kind of endless these days where there weren't that many options when I started. So you kind of had to work with what you were given unless you were mechanical in nature and could understand how to tweak it and adjust it like I did. But yeah, just different mindsets, different time, different era. We still dragged a club around and, hunted animals and dinner with our bare hands and things like that,
Push your cars with your feet.
All right. You got anything else? What do you want to touch on there?
So the only thing that I might see is if something for me to add in the very beginning, which would be like, look, sorry, you would say something to the effect of, we already have an interview with Aaron, so you could click on the button to check out that interview. Let's get you up to speed. Aaron, could you just give us in a concise, statement what separates Tattcom from other power supplies?
Okay. Good.
Precise statement.
Precise statement, down to the fucking down,
just less than 15
What
minutes.
separates
down
us?
to the nanometer.
Less than 15 minutes. Let's see, what's my tagline here? Help me out, Mark.
Your tagline.
My tagline. Buy Tattcom because physics, bitch.
Yeah.
Science matters.
Science matters.
Yeah. Or it could be like, Aaron, me do math.
I mean, where I was going with the phase, it's like, hey, I'm Aaron from Tattcom, and I could sit here and bore you for 15 minutes telling you how my product works in great detail, or I could just tell you that it's physics, bitch, and you'll like it.
Honestly, that would probably work here, because then the truth is this video is going to drag on to a bunch of kind of ear-numbing fucking stuff.
No, I mean, like at the end of the day, like I see that you have a precision task, and we deliver a precision product. At the end of the day, lab grade power supplies had their place in powering tattoo machines for a while because people acknowledged the need for quality power. Now people think that you can plug in a $25 Amazon thing and get the same kind of power you're going to get out of a quality power supply.
Well, the thing is like tattooers in my generation have been doing it with fucking ill-fitting tools for so long that yes, a good tattooer can work with the crap off of Amazon, unfortunately, or whatever, but the average guy is screwed. The average guy coming into tattooing without any sort of real working knowledge of mechanics and what's going on with the interaction with the needles and inks and skin doesn't stand a chance with the mediocre tools or subpar tools. But yeah, I go with your physics pitch thing here. Like,
or I could just say that, if you want, we deliver, we have a quality product that's manufactured by us in the US, and I don't know, it's at the end of the day,
make it a punchline of some sort, really. I mean, kind of just sort of like something that's going to, it's going to shock them a little bit, get their attention as to, hey, I want to hear what this guy has to say. Like that's what the whole thing is to kind of lead them into staying is the longer they stay in the video, the more they might learn. Whether they appreciate it or not, it's a whole different story. But I don't know. It just, people are so almost require shock value these days. If you don't say something a little controversial, you had that in your list, make it and say something controversial. That was part of your.
Or I could just be like, hey, have you ever felt that your power supply sucked?
Well, but I don't care. Throw people under the bus. It doesn't bother me at all.
I don't need to. I mean, I can just say my competition and just generalize it. Like at the end of the day, or the competition, the alternative products on the market. It doesn't even have to be the competition.
We can stand by the
other
specifications
options
we sell, and they can't.
The other options.
We can prove. They can't. Whatever. But
no, I mean they could. It's just like at the end of the day, they could have gone through and engineered their power output stage to not have as much DC ripple, but they didn't. So at the end of the day,
something like that, something with a sort of that sarcastic note is totally cool.
They could have taken the time, but they just pencil whipped it and just pushed it. And at the end of the day,
well, because they got to. Truth is, it's because they got to launch a new product every fucking month to try and stay relevant.
I'm not even talking about that one.
Huh?
I said, I'm not even talking about that one.
Oh, a lot of them. But all right.
Yeah,
so
at the end of the day, that's part of it, but the ones that are being advertised to plug into other machines, and even their corded power options that were out there, and this is multiple manufacturers that are making this and doing, it's on various levels. It's just, hey, these are simple, whether it's you shorting the output. But
I think what you just said is kind of it, like, we validate all of our claims, whereas we've tested every other manufacturer and found that not to be true. Something along those lines is totally cool.
Or like we've tested to find out where the bar is, and then we set it higher, and that's where we put our products.
That works too. Absolutely. Yeah. Whichever one of these you want to run with is totally cool.
Yes, that's fine. We've tested the other options on the market to figure out where the bar was, and then we raised it. And
it was pretty fucking low, wasn't it?
Well,
the bar was pretty low.
Like I told you, we did like that test 6 volts, like, half an amp, something like that, like 500 milliamps. And like, they're at like 50 millivolts of ripple, like 0.05 volts of ripple. We're at 0.005 volts of ripple. 10 times better.
What's 10x?
But I mean, when you have a 0.1 volt resolution on your adjustment, and then you have 0.05 volts of noise, plus or minus, then that's essentially you taking your power supply and adjusting it 0.1
give or take a decimal or two, man. Why you gotta be so picky? But all right, so I gotta kind of like reiterate a little bit here or something like this. So
all right, so you want to be like we've already talked before, so click the link.
Yeah. Okay. So for those of you who don't know Aaron, we've talked before when he first launched his Tattcom power supply, and there'll be a link below if you want to watch that video here. But let's try and catch up with the latest and greatest and see what this man's got going today. No, I didn't even lead into that question. Fucking idiot. words.
I mean, I could run off that. I could just be like, we're still over here, developing the best products out there and building them in the USA and having fun doing it and seeing the smiles on our customers' faces when they.
Well, that just pick a line and run with that.
We could redo it. That's up to you, bud. What do you think? What do you think, Gabe?
Yeah, either run with it
or you want me to.
Yeah, let's do it so it's more natural.
I'll add a little another one back in there or whatever. So, all right, sure. And if you guys aren't familiar, Aaron and I go way back here. Well, at least 5 or 6 years now since he got on the scene, and we did another video. The link will be below. But let's catch up with Aaron now and see what he's got going on these days.
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Aaron from Tattcom, and if you don't know about us, we build tattoo technology products. Right now, our flagship product, the ESCX power supply, we manufacture in house and do it with pride in the U.S. I'm saying too much.
You forgot to call out the punk bitches that don't do it right.
All you have to do is be like, and we're different because.
Yeah.
Go ahead, call out some of the punk ass bitches out there that ain't doing their job right.
No, so.
All right, let me re-ad-lib one more time here, man. Okay, let's see. And if you guys don't know Aaron, I've known him since he first got on the scene in the tattoo world, and he makes some killer power supplies. We did a talk with him a while back. That link will be in the description below if you want to check it all out. But I'm going to let Aaron tell you why he makes a better power supply than anybody else out there.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, we've talked before about this, but if we want to boil it down to a short answer, we've done our research and tested the other options on the market and seen what's out there, and we figured out where the bar was. We set it higher, and we design our products around that, trying to go a step above and not take any shortcuts to deliver the best quality products to our customers. We do that.
And I know you're a little too modest to say it, but I know you can back up and validate all the claims that you put on your products. And I know, because I've seen a lot of your testing, that a lot of the stuff you test, they don't quite reach the specs that the other manufacturers might claim that they do. So I'm going to put you on the spot on that one.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get into the testing, a lot of the times it's very boring and it involves math, and that's where that stuff excites me. I like seeing results and seeing the theory play out into actual practice. So it's nice. Not nice seeing that there's poor quality products on the market. I don't like seeing that, but at the end of the day, seeing that we went the extra mile and a half, I'd say, not just extra mile, because extra mile would have put us ahead, but then we just made sure to really go and design a precision product that, is well built. And like I said, will deliver quality power to their user for years to come.
I know you, and I know you're driven by the actual efficiency, quality, all of that good stuff. Whereas, let's just say some others out there are more focused on the volume and the numbers of units they could push. I have been trying to get you back in the day when you first started. I was trying to push you to get your product out there faster, and you resisted and just wouldn't do it because you had to perfect it before you got it out there. And it's just nice to meet business people that really care about the quality and the precision involved, more so than getting the product on the market and getting it sold.
Yeah, I mean, if at the end of the day, would you want to have a house built and know that it was on a bad foundation? That at the end of the year it was, or end of the day it wasn't as good as it could be. Not that it's reaching perfectionism, but something like we're saying, if we start out with a bad core design of the circuit board and other components, no amount of software or any other band-aids are going to make it good again. So sometimes that stuff takes time and show you how resilient you are to failure.
Yes. All right, let's get on to boring these people with all the gory details and talking nerds. So
Awesome.
Let's move on here. So,
So
Aaron, it is always a pleasure to sit and talk with you. I could nerd out with you for just hours and hours on end, but at some point we got to cut this short and keep our conversations personal because I got to get these gory details from you on the phone here that you won't talk about on film. And I look forward. I hope I can get to run into you somewhere out on the convention circuit this year. I'm hoping to get back out to a few of them and see you there. So, you got any last words here, brother?
thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me, and definitely been a pleasure talking to you as always. Have to get up there once it warms up a little bit, I'd say. I'm not a fan of the snow, but I definitely enjoy the time that I get to spend around the needle jig operations. So,
I know, man. You gotta get up here.
So,
My machines have been idle a little too long. You should come up and play. But anyways, man, I love you. You take care. You be safe, and I'll talk to you next time.
all right, love you too, buddy. We'll see you.
Oh, I forgot to press record.
I was